right, we're gonna get right down to the lesson on this one. For this, you're gonna tune your guitar to an open G. All right, to achieve that, you could either use your tuner, or the hack here is that you want all of the notes to represent chord tones of G major. So you got G, B, and D. Get beer, dude, if you're over 21. So whatever the closest chord tone is, for example, for the E strings, you're going to turn those into Ds. So you can take your open D and tune your 2 E strings to match that, to be octaves of that D. Your next string is an A string. So the easiest thing is to drop that down, and you can use the hack is you use your G string to match that. And then who's left? D, that's a chord tone. B, that's a chord tone, and then everybody's happy. Okay, I would sort of avoid the low E string, even though that it's in the game. It's just going to kind of be weird having that drone note as your lowest note not being a G most of the time. And so you can kind of treat the guitar as if almost like it's a 5 string for this entire song. So as it starts, you have this grip here, and I've noticed by looking at the live versions that he does kind of this grip. You could also get away with just putting a flat bar across the 12. But this is how it begins. Okay, and what you're fretting there is middle finger on the 12th fret of the A string, ring finger on the 12th fret of the B string. And that grip's going to come up a couple of times in this little descending chord progression. And then we move to this one, which is middle finger, which is doing our bass notes here, is on the 11th fret of the E string, pointer finger on the 10th fret of the B string. That same shape, drop it down a whole step. And then moving down to this, back to that major grip that we did originally here, except now it's on the, everybody's on the 7th fret. And then quickly down to the 5th, and then open. The live versions I saw, it looks like he's covering these 2 frets here. So I have my pointer on the 3rd fret of the B string and the 5th fret of the E string. So it kind of just adds a little finality to that chord instead of it feeling so open. You could live without it, but I think that's what he's doing. And then A minor 7 grip. Slide up a whole step, slide back a whole step, and then finish it off with the open. Okay, so one more time. Boom. Those are your verses. From there, it goes to that pre-chorus C chord, which is basically just barring the 5th fret, everybody but the low E, and then a D, which is on the 7th fret, barring everybody. Stays there double, and then back to the open G. This next little walk up, very Blackbirdy, okay, including most of the rest of it too. So it looks like this. Open G, and then this is that minor grip that we had earlier, except now it's middle finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, pointer finger on the 1st fret of the B string. So it's open, everybody, then that chord, then slide up a whole step, and then flatten it out on that C again. D, let it ring. You could also, if you wanted to, keep that bass note, give it a little extra bottom. And then here comes that. Then back it up with that same chord we did before. So once again, you got that C, the Blackbird chords, and then back up to the D, and then back to that open open G, A7 grip, which is a C, slide up, which is a D, and then hit that one more time, open. So let's do that whole mamma jamma, okay? G chord, D over F sharp-ish, E minor, D, C, G, C, D, C, G. Do something that you don't carry, to hurt you beat a tone apart, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made. Go on the back road so we can get away. And if you give me what's there, and show me a sign, I'll be there to be moving. That's it. It's kind of cool when you discover a band that you didn't realize there was so much to them. This is one of those for me. Little Feat. The more I listen to them, the more I'm realizing, I was like, oh, yeah, I like that song. Ooh, I love that song. And probably everybody's gateway songs to Little Feat would be Dixie Chicken and Fat Man in the Bathtub. There are some, there's some popular songs that came out of their catalog, but for me, Willin is one that sticks out as just a really special song. Partly because of the beautiful guitar work in it. The original version, appeared on an album cut, featured Ry Cooder, and the legend is that Lowell George was working on like a model airplane or something like that, and he slipped and cut himself, and so he couldn't play the lead guitar lines on that, and so they brought in Ry Cooder, and that version really sounds kind of goofy. It almost sounds like a novelty song gone wrong, like they're not quite sure what they're doing with it. Subsequent versions, especially, has appeared on Waiting for Columbus, as well as other live versions I've seen, like at the Midnight Special, I think is one. That's where I looked at the Lowell's hands and tried to kind of match up what he was doing. Those are a lot cooler. The vocals really settle in, and the dynamics of the band kind of gets where it's going. And I've seen ones where it's almost like when they pull out that chorus and let it really make you wait to hear it. I like all the versions. I think they're all pretty amazing. The real standout here for me is the lyrics. There's so many elements to it. There's the idea of his love story of thinking about Dallas Alice. Out on the road in every headlight, like it's just beautifully. I think how many headlights you're seeing, and every single one of them, bringing you back to your, love you're pining for is kind of cool, and you wonder what the backstory is there. Talks about some of the seedier elements of it, about being drunk and dirty, about smuggling, people and cigarettes and contraband, and also the illicit drug use here. This is going to be in a playlist known as Songs of Substance. So songs that mention not only songs that are great, but also songs that talk about illicit substances, whether it's alcohol or it's drugs or things like that. And that really figures in on Lowell's backstory. And so, my big thought on this is not only the compactness of the story, running into a character, and I guess a bit of an outlaw. And that, to me, is probably a metaphor for life on the road as a rock musician, I'm guessing, and supposedly he thought of this while he's pumping gas, I think working in California and seeing interstate truckers come through. And a lot of those names I noticed when I was on vacation with my family. We did a big road trip through California and Arizona, and I started looking at the map and I said, like, oh, Tehachapi, Tonopah, Tucumcari, and these are all these places that are really out there, and all those syllables and those words, kind of like if you invert them, they all kind of sound like each other. And so he's playing with language, I think. He's also playing in the colors of the Southwest and all these different cities. One of their other tunes, he talks about from like Denver to the ocean. He talks about Atlanta. So there's a bunch of songs where he's name checking cities, but this is one where he's pulling out these very probably only you've been there if you've been on the interstates. Adds a little bit of credibility and detail to the song. The other element of it too, speaking of the alliteration of all of those being cities that start with the letter T, drunk and dirty, don't you know, that's one. He talks also about really powerful verbs, warped by the rain. driven by the snow. Normally you think of things being warped, like they're out there in the elements and they're, getting wonky, like a structure, is taking on, moisture or plywood peeling apart. You think of those are things that are warped. And he's talking about himself being warped, driven by the snow. Normally you think of snow being blown off a road by a plow or something like that. And he's the one who's being snowed in. Thinking of the truck, basically, leaning into a mountain pass and getting blasted by snow. He also talks about some things that only someone in the industry would really think about, driving on the back roads to avoid a way station where maybe his cargo would be exposed. Or he talks about every single, driving every truck that's ever been made. He doesn't come in and say drove a Peterbilt, drove a Mack truck. He's talking, in someone who has had those experiences, just say, yeah, I've driven them all. When he talks about weed, whites, wine, 3 W's, right? And so there's a certain beauty in the language that he's using here. And again, probably autobiographical in a way, and talking about going into a new city or going from place to place, having those thoughts of people that you miss on the road. The next one, high voltage verbs coming at you, next verse. Smuggled some smokes and folks in Mexico. So you got that inline rhyme also. So very effective. Baked by the sun, so being baked, kicked by the wind, robbed by the sleet, had your head stoved in. I mean, what an image that is. Someone getting their head stoved in, like you picture like a mace, whacking them in the head, and under what circumstances were you stoved and lived to tell? Being still on my feet, being able to walk out there. And again, I could be wrong, but if it is about the metaphor of playing for a crowd where you just go, I don't care what happened before I rolled into this city, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to give the best show I possibly can. And there was times in his life, where Lowell did die young, and probably times where shows had to be canceled, or he went out there and wasn't able to give 100%. I think this is sort of like a motivational of saying, I'm still willing. Put me out there, almost like a boxer who's maybe past his prime and just still ready for that title shot. Interesting, that he's doing the pretty guitar work on this one. Other songs, he's famous for having that very compressed slide sound, very smooth, very economical, pretty slide. Famous for having also, the sound of somebody from the deep South, where you would swear that you wouldn't know this guy was from like Laurel Canyon or wherever he grew up in California. He does sound like he's Bourbon Street, born and raised. And so I think that is something that's very interesting too, that he has this soul that's bigger than the sum of his own biography. And so to have this song that has this biography of sorts, even if it's creative and fictional, it's absolutely has the stamp of Lowell George on it. Love the guitar work, love the lyrics. As far as their catalog goes, I've been checking out a lot of their work. I love the song Roll 'Em Easy, another song of substance, awesome. Long Distance Love, my goodness. I mean, there's so many good ones. So dig in, listen to it. The album artwork is beautiful. Neon Park is the artist. He's almost an extra member of the band in a way for giving the artwork. It's very kind of interesting and abstract. Jello molds and tomatoes and characters come to life and things like that. So you'll see. I mean, there is a style and a motif to their albums too, which is really cool. Learn this one. If you learn the chords, maybe then tackle jam with somebody, start tackling those leads. All right. Hope you had fun. See you on the next one.